To have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate one more time, as we have relentlessly discussed the state of education and the way it's getting impacted in COVID era. Tonight I've got an interesting report lined up for you and a conversation on that. Viewers, a big casualty of the COVID pandemic has been the education for our youngsters, for our children, as schools remain shut across the country. And the hope for them reopening is bare minimum. The big question is, what is the impact going to be on our students, on our children? Now, many schools and many state governments and even the center are pushing through for online education system, online classes, having television channels that can be used to impart education. But that may not be enough, simply because in a country like ours, there are lakhs of people who still don't have access to this kind of a good infrastructure. In a country like ours, there are lakhs of people who themselves are struggling right now with their own livelihood, struggling to earn money, struggling to pay the school fees, let alone buy a smartphone or a gadget for their child to take online classes on. Now, before we get into this conversation again, let me tell you about this study. A study called the State of Sector Report was conducted by the Center Square Foundation, and it has brought to light some really interesting findings. This is actually an over 200 pages exhaustive study on the private school education system in our country. But Mirana has decided that for now we will first focus on the COVID impact, which is a part of this study. That is more immediate. The need of the hour right now is to figure out, to set up and develop a SOP for education in the COVID era. So let me tell you what this report really says. Fact number one, the report says that 25%, only 25% parents claim that they had paid fees during the lockdown. While the schools are actually claiming that many of them haven't even collected fees since the lockdown hit. 50% of the schools are also claiming that they have reduced their fees. Thousands of families have migrated in search of livelihood in the middle of this lockdown, which also means that the families and the children have moved, and their school enrollment will also change if they do join school this year. Nearly 50% of the teachers weren't even paid for the month of March. Now remember, lockdown only happened in the last week of March. Some schools shut earlier, so even by mid-March, still half the teachers haven't even been paid for that month. Less than 20% of the teachers have actually even received salary after that. 66% of private schools are using WhatsApp to interact with the students. Yes, in the absence of a proper system, infrastructure for online education, in the absence of a strong enough internet connection, teachers are actually now resorting to using WhatsApp to impart education to the students. Many students, like I said, don't have access to smartphones and internet. 50% teachers engaged in WhatsApp teaching learning. But they've also found that only 33% parents can support online learning at this point of time. This is a point we've repeatedly raised here on Mirror Now. The accessibility, affordability, and are the parents even able to give that kind of time to the children who are now stuck at home rather than being in schools? That's the other big pain point which is there. So without really wasting any more time, let me open this up for conversation. We've got a wide variety of expert panelists who are joining us this evening. I've got Senior Fellow of the ORF, Leena Chandran Wadia, joining us this evening. Rajinder Nath, Vice President of the All India DAV Institution. Vikas Junjanwala, Founder and CEO of Sunshine Schools. And Arundhati Chavan, President for Parents Teachers Association United Forum. But first up, I actually want to go across to Ashish Dhawan, the Founder Chairman of Central Square Foundation, the institution that's actually released this report. Ashish, it's also very important to understand who is it that you have surveyed? Who is it that you've interacted with? What was the target sampling for these findings, especially in reference to the COVID impact?
Yeah, thank you very much. And as you mentioned, I think the State of the Sector report provides a broader perspective of the private sector and the fact that it plays a very important role in 47.5% of all are school-going children. So 120 million out of the 250 million actually go to private schools. The survey is not, we wanted to do a quick dipstick survey across urban and semi-urban rural to get a sense. As you know, in urban India, 73% of children already go to private school. And I think what most of us don't realize is that 70% of private schools charge less than 1,000 rupees a month. 70% of children go to private schools, charge less than 1,000 rupees a month. So the reason for the findings, why parents are not paying up or why these schools are struggling to pay their teachers is that these are really budget schools. They serve middle income or lower middle income parents. And there is real hardship, in the economy. People are out of their jobs, people have had to migrate. So this is going to be a very tough year for schools. It's going to be a very tough year for children and families. And my fear is that children are going to fall behind because of the fact that they won't be able to access schools, their teachers, and that several of these budget schools will actually shut down in the process because they are not viable or they can't survive through this crisis.
Okay, no, I understand. And, one interesting part that I saw in the report was also, like you said, that this is going to have a impact, not just this year, a wide-scale impact that could go on for several years. The other interesting point was also how this will highlight and further perhaps exacerbate the gap, the learning gap between the high-end schools and the affordable schools, and the children who come there, the ones who actually are struggling right now with online accessibility. But let me actually bring in our other panelists as well. And Ashish, you feel free to come in since you're well versed with the findings of the report. Wherever you deem fit to make a point, do let me know.
Sure.
But let me also bring in Mr. Vikas Jhunjhunwala. Mr. Jhunjhunwala, can you shed some more light on this? In this segment, how are schools adapting and how much of a struggle it is? Everybody keeps talking about online classes, but do we really have a clear system in place?
So actually I would be, can you hear me, Tanvi?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I would be running one of those schools that Ashish is talking about. So I have two schools in the NCR area, and we basically are a budget private school, and our fees are between 500 and 1,000 rupees per month. So it's a very different, as Ashish mentioned very correctly, the perception that private schools are for the rich and government schools are for the poor is completely incorrect. And at this point of time, there is a huge number, almost 70% of children who are going to schools which charge less than 1,000 rupees a month. And therefore, the socioeconomic background, the infrastructure, etc., that parents have of children who go to these schools is very different. So online means many things. It's the way I think about it is that you can basically take a railway train from Delhi to Patna, but there's going to be different infrastructure depending upon if it's first AC, depending upon if it's second, third AC, sleeper, general compartment. I would say that schools like ours, we really can't do Zoom classes or Google Meet and Microsoft Teams, primarily because of the fact that our parents don't have the devices. Typically, there would be a single device, which is a smartphone. In the house, there would be no Wi-Fi connection. And even the smartphone would actually be used by a parent who is going to work. So the way that we've had to adapt around that is not by doing synchronous real-time classes, but actually by doing, as you said rightly, using WhatsApp, video calling, using feature phones. So we do a combination of basically creating videos that teachers create in the school, and then following up with the children over regular calls to see if they're understanding. For lower classes, we have to really closely interact with the parents. So it's a combination. It's depending upon the situation, depending upon the infrastructure. Different schools are taking different strategies. High-end schools are doing Zoom calls, etc. Schools like ours, which cater to parents that still have a smartphone, are doing WhatsApp, sending videos. But schools which are even, in rural areas, for example, might not even have that facility. So they might actually be doing worksheets. So basically, the parents would come to school once a week, pick up the worksheets, and submit the homework or submit the work sort of in a few days' time. So it really depends upon the particular situation in terms of what strategy is being followed.
Okay, actually, that's very interesting. The use of WhatsApp that you said. Can you shed a little bit more light on that, Mr. Jhunjhunwala? How does that work? The interaction between the teacher and the students on that platform.
Okay, so as I said, we tend to be very different. So we can do 2 or 3 different strategies. One strategy is just sending out worksheets. So that's the most simple strategy that some schools are doing. So they basically would send out worksheets on WhatsApp. They would not necessarily even be asking the students to send back the work that is done. The next level, which is you send worksheets and the students send them back and you correct them. So that's the next level. The third level is basically where you essentially handhold the students. So you would basically end up doing video calls, or you end up basically doing, so you basically, when you get the data back in terms of how well the child has basically performed on the worksheets that you've sent, you would then be able to see where the problems are. So similar to what would happen in the classroom, but unfortunately it's not real time and it's not synchronous, but we've had to adapt to the fact that, these are the channels that we have. So the teacher would then basically call up the parent or call up the student or whoever is working with the student, if it's a small, sort of class 1, class 2 student. And then they would basically interact with them to understand where the problem is, to try and explain to them, etc. We also end up doing a lot of videos, short 4-5 minute videos, which essentially explains the concept. So it would be similar to a Byju's, but obviously it's not very fancy videos. It's basically what our teachers can do. But essentially it's like pre-recorded videos that we send, which essentially explains the concept, to the child, and the child can then listen to the videos a few times and hopefully can understand, what the concept is. So for example, if it's addition, single digit addition, the videos would try to explain that. They could be YouTube videos directly, or they could be videos which are more customized to the particular situation. In terms of the language, has to be a language that the child understands in. The concepts have to be ones that are linked to concepts that have been done previously. So as I said, it really depends on the school. We are trying to do the whole package of a relatively what we call a premium service, where it's highly interactive, but very constrained, obviously, given the tools that are available on both sides.
Okay, interesting, very, very interesting. And if more, yes, go ahead, please.
So I was done.
Yeah, what I was saying is that, just
no, go ahead, Ashish, you wanted to make a point?
Saying. Yeah, I was saying that, this obviously schools have been forced to resort to asynchronous communication because it's only in the elite households where you have, Wi-Fi and broadband and you can have these Zoom classes. I think what's interesting is while, it's not the same as being in the classroom, I think these things will be here to stay post-COVID. So I'll give you 2 examples. One is we at Square Foundation worked with Google.org and created a set of math and science videos mapped to the curriculum. And we had 17 million video views in less than 3 months. 0 marketing, is just on YouTube. And different state governments are sending this out to their children. And secondly, we worked with 2 young startups, nonprofits, that are working with WhatsApp. And they're finding and using Anganwadi teachers or school teachers to send this out. I mean, state like Madhya Pradesh has over 50,000 WhatsApp groups. And we're finding an 85-90% response rate. So I think in the future, you could see a text message, WhatsApp, homework being sent, teacher being able to communicate with the parent, channels that didn't exist in the past. So that's just a point that I wanted to make, is I think these things will be here to stay post-COVID.
Yeah, I think we're all in different segments, evolving, learning to adapt to the, to this reality and how this is going to be perhaps a way of living for a long, long time. And so every segment is evolving. Of course, the fear of a long-term damage and impact is more when it comes to our students and their education. Let me actually bring in Arundhati Chavan on the other aspect, which is also a significant part of this research report. And Arundhati, that's the point of fee payment and the financial model of these schools. The fact that parents themselves are not able to pay in many cases. Obviously, when schools were shut, they didn't want to pay. Many of them are struggling even with their own livelihood. Teachers haven't been paid in many cases since March. That's also impacting them. The private schools themselves will then struggle to have any kind of a model and shut down. What's the sense that you've got from both sides, parents and teachers?
See, when whatever we were discussing, there are two types of schools, as we say, that elite schools and budget schools. So what present scenario is that the parents from elite school, they have high, means where there is a fee structure is very high. They don't want to pay because they say that, okay, our business is not running properly, we are not getting salary properly, so we will not pay. And the budget school problem is like, the parents are from middle class and lower middle class, and as Mr. Junjunwala said, they are shifting to their native places, and also they don't know, like, whether they will come back or not. But the thing is, like, somewhere our system also has to be blamed, because many of the schools, they have complained that they have not received fees for last years, means 1920. So, and then it is like, where how they will pay for 2021. Now the government has issued a GR that don't pay the fees till the situation improves. There are no proper directives from the government. So in this case, like, parents are under the impression that, okay, we don't have to pay the fees, and eventually the management is facing problem of paying the salary of the teachers. So I feel very bad that, okay, parents have problem, but, like, even though the schools are giving them options that, okay, you can pay monthly, we can give you scholarship, something, but they are not accepting it. It is that we don't want to pay the fees, and that is why management is finding it very difficult for to pay the salaries of the teachers. Eventually the teachers are the factors which are important. They have to be motivated, and with this COVID situation and online learning, as Mr. Junjunwala said, that where there is no infrastructure, they are using WhatsApp, and I really appreciate when I interact with the parents from lower socioeconomic strata where they don't have Android phones, but they say कि नहीं, teacher हमें phone करती है, she calls us, she asks us whether my child has understood the concept, or like, she sends us the worksheets, and also these things are to be appreciated. But the thing is, like, somewhere I feel that government is to be blamed for the whole system, because I feel that they are not taking proper decision. Whatever decision they are taking, it is just like, for the cheap popularity. I am very sorry to say that. So if the things are
okay, let me also bring in Mr. Rajinder Nath on this viewpoint. Yes, let's talk a little bit more about teachers and how teachers are managing right now. Not only do they have to put in the extra effort to adapt, to figure how to impart education, how to still be able to interact with each student, and ensure that they're learning what they have to, while staring at a situation where they perhaps may have not have been paid for a while. Mr. Rajinder Nath?
Yes, you are right. Actually, parents feel that because they are not sending their children to the school, so they are not supposed to pay. But they are forgetting that the schools are run by, even the private schools are run by the societies. And there is a law that 85% of the fees have to be spent in 1 year. Only 15% can be saved. Of course, that is only if the school can save from the fees. So from those 15%, school cannot pay. School has either to pay the fees either from the fees that those are collected or from their reserves. Most of the schools don't have any reserves for that. So the parents have to cooperate with the schools in this matter. They cannot afford to give fees to give salary to the teachers. Or we are trying our best. We have all types of schools. We have elite schools also, and we have budget schools also. But we are facing the same problem with every school. Even the elite schools are facing this problem. So parents must think that
Yes.
paying is very important, and paying fees is very important. So I think from this आपके माध्यम से I would like
Yes,
to tell
no,
the parents.
Mr. Rajinder Nath.
हाँ,
Yes,
हाँ जी.
I understand the point you're making, especially if these are schools where students who come from a relatively well-off background, where parents can afford to pay even in such times, they perhaps should. Otherwise, the school itself is staring at a possibility of shutting down. But there is the other segment, and which you also mentioned, where
Yes,
maybe
yeah,
the
I know.
parents themselves are struggling. The schools
They are.
where they're
There
only
are.
paying a minimum amount of fee that they may not be able to. Yes.
There
तो
are
वहाँ पे
many.
क्या
There are not.
solution है then, राजेंद्र जी?
But it is very important for the country to keep the schools afloat also. To keep the education afloat, the schools must be kept afloat. And to keep the schools afloat, especially those very poor budget schools, I think government must step in. Government must pay for this at least some portion of the salary of the teachers, so that teachers don't get disheartened, and at least they continue whatever they are continuing. Number one. Number two, those parents who don't have even the WhatsApp with them, there are, of course, but they are in very remote areas. Of course, most of the parents, I think 80% of the parents, they have the facility of WhatsApp. And the teachers have actually, as been told, the teachers have to put an extra effort for e-schooling, for online schooling, because for online teaching, they have to prepare the lesson beforehand, prepare the notes also, which they have to flash to the students so that they can read the notes afterwards also. So I think it is, unless parents, government and the schools cooperate with each other, our education will suffer, definitely.
Okay, let me bring in Leena Chandran also on this. Leena Chandran Vadia, can I get your views as well? This then seems also at another kind of a crisis that we may be staring at, where if school fees are not being paid, teachers are not being paid, and these schools, especially in the affordable segment, face the possibility of shutdown. That would be a larger setback.
So there are no easy answers to any of these things, So the report does a very good job of actually presenting, things as they are, the pros and the cons, actually. So, in principle, schools should be run by philanthropists and people who have some corpus, like Mr. Rajinder Nath mentioned, that there should be some reserves from which teachers can be paid, but many schools don't have it. The fact remains that during this lockdown, it is the teachers who have owned the relationships with the children. The children miss their teachers. They're happy to have the teachers call them. And so their teachers are working. and they are they're applying their ingenuity, and there are amazing stories of teachers actually finding the phone numbers of all the children or their parents or their neighbors and trying to reach out to the children and giving them tasks to do. Most kitchens in the homes have become major labs because teachers know that some resources are available in the kitchens and so on, for art, for all kinds of things. So teachers are working; they do deserve to be paid, and yes, but if budget schools don't get fees income, they will have to shut down. But as the report says, that they probably don't bounce back afterwards, because there is a strong perception among parents that private schools are better run and will provide better learning outcomes, although that's not necessarily true.
Okay, so let me go on to the second aspect and start with you, Leena Chandran, on that. Is there an urgent need for perhaps a clearer SOP, or should we leave it to individual institutions and schools to figure out how they want to adapt in the current scenario?
I think that our country is too large and too complex and too diverse for anyone to set down detailed SOPs, but guidelines can help actually. And most schools are doing that. Most schools are coping as best as they can with the situation. But it is true that long before gig economy became a household word among us, the gig economy was present among teachers. There are amazing stories about teachers, especially in higher education, getting paid only on clock hour basis, meaning X amount of rupees for 1 hour of lecture and so on. That's not a way any society should treat its teachers. So, but on the other hand, a lot of the responsibility for some of these situations going wrong is to do with the way we regulate education, the way we don't actually go after learning outcomes. We don't measure learning outcomes. We only put constraints on who can open schools and under what conditions. So there are problems on both sides, but there's a fascinating discussion in this report on the fact that who are the people who run schools. And I think it would be good that in future years, if we could delve deeper into this and what is the motivation of people who run schools. Turns out that some of the the low fee paying schools are run by people who see it as a business proposition. So despite the low fees, they are able to raise some surplus. So, then in that case, they should be paying at least something to their teachers. That's what I think.
Okay, point well taken. I just also want to pull out a few more pointers from the report as well, even as we're running those text pointer graphics, in terms of the challenges that the report also highlights. And we know we've spoken about some of these, the stress on the parent and the school finances that we just discussed, how parents are actually now looking for more affordable options as well, more affordable school options. Closure of schools due to financial stress is a big one that again I raise right now. The learning gap between low and high fee schools may actually get more amplified. Household access to digital devices, internet access to teachers, parents of private schools unable to support children, and of course the skills that teachers may also need to transition, the impact that it may have on students to transition to a digital platform where they will not be able to have that same kind of a one-on-one interaction. Now, a lot of these things that we have all spoken about are also long-term. Perhaps the solutions are long-term. Mr. Ashish Dhawan, what's your sense? Are there any quick fix solutions? Because what we need is a system that is workable right now. While a lot of this would actually involve investment and planning into infrastructure over a long term.
Yeah, so look, we already have a rich private school ecosystem. I think the first thing we have to realize is we have to shatter this myth that private schools are elite schools. It is not the case. Private schools enroll children from across the spectrum. I mean, 1 out of 2 children now in our country are going to private schools. They're here to stay. They are, in the Prime Minister's words, Atmanirbhar, self-sufficient. They're not asking the government for money. parents spend their hard-earned money, in fact, a high proportion of their discretionary income. They vote with their own feet to take their children out of government school because government school is not delivering what they expect. And they're enrolling these children in private schools. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate that we offer parents this choice. Parents should be able to decide. So I think that these schools, the challenge they face is they're not recognized or in the formal sense that many other sectors are. And so I think the purpose of like GST is to formalize the informal. Similarly, we need to recognize in the private school sector, the license Raj operates, that these schools are sort of chori chori, chupke chupke, they're under the covers, they are supposed to be not for profit, but yet they make money. They sometimes pay their teachers in cash. They are over-regulated in a sense. And so we need to, they don't qualify as MSME. And so as there is an MSME bailout right now, they can't avail of it. Whereas we should be supporting these private sector initiatives as well. They employ lots of people. Private schools alone employ almost 3 million teachers and many other staff. So I think we do need to look at this sector more holistically going forward and understand that it plays an important role. We can't wish it away. And we need to think sensibly about how we ensure that we don't regulate the sector to the extent we do, but at the same time, hold the sector accountable, create the incentives so that this sector will improve learning outcomes for the children, because 1 out of 2 children in this country go to these private schools. The private schools will survive. Some will close, but they're here to stay going forward. Because if you ask me, they've responded more quickly. I think the public system's done a good job. But, here the owner's footprint is there. I mean, they're reacting, like Vikas was talking about how he's reacted. Private schools are doing whatever they can. WhatsApp, teachers are there. And I think teachers across the country, private or public, are the heroes. These are frontline workers who are working out of their kitchens, out of their drawing rooms to ensure that they serve their children or parents. So we must celebrate them and ensure that coming out of this, we think about a sensible approach to private schools.
Okay, no, I absolutely understand. Of course, the point that I wanted to focus more on is the immediate, yes, private schools as a segment and the kind of support that it may need, the work that they're doing in the affordable segment must also be spoken about. But Vikas Jhunjhunwala, right now on top of everybody's mind is how to navigate COVID and how to still ensure that your child who's at home stays busy, is able to keep his mind occupied, is learning something, and where do the schools come in, in this entire picture then?
It's an evolving situation. I was joking the other day that we have a very funny situation. Startups like Byju's and Vedantu have spent 2 years trying to figure out how to make online learning work with a huge amount of investment. We are trying to do it. It's like the car is running at 100 kilometers an hour, and we're trying to actually shift to online learning with a segment which is not ready because they don't have devices. So I think that as Ashish said, we are responding in real time, to the situation. Like even just before this, today the whole day I've spent talking to my parents. I've made 30, 40 calls, trying to get feedback in terms of what is working, what is not working for them, trying to then take that feedback to my management and trying to understand what kind of solutions can come in. Can we do individual video calls with the children? Can we increase the amount of workload, for the children? Can we include more activities? So as everyone is saying, there are no easy answers because we are doing this in real time. We are not geared or we are not designed for online, but we're having to do it in real time while the situation is evolving. And I guess we're just doing the best we can. There are no good answers.
Okay, so let me ask you this question because it popped up in this debate. The fact about supporting the teachers, the fact about parents not paying school fees right now because of, and that really impacting the business. What have your conversations with parents been about? How have you managed to convince them that, look, we are going to do as many classes as possible, but you need to continue paying whatever you can?
It's an evolving situation. July is a very critical month for us in Northern India, because this is really when after the summer vacation, things become very real. We are already seeing about 33% attrition in terms of children not coming back, not even interested in online classes, because of lack of infrastructure, because the kids are back in the village and there is no connectivity whatsoever over there. But for the remaining 67% of parents, it's really an individual level interaction. I think it's really showing a lot of empathy on both sides, understanding their pain or what they're going through, and correctly, the lower middle class is suffering a lot at this point of time, and also trying to explain to them, our situation and trying to find a middle ground. In terms of, चलो आप जितना दे सकते हो उतना दे दो, जिससे कि हम अपने टीचर्स को पे कर दें, हमारे जो बेसिक नीड्स है मीट कर दें, and then as things get better for you and for us, we'll move forward. So it has to be something which has a lot of empathy on both sides. They can't. I think helping them understand we're also real people. We're not just a building or a no-name institution that is not suffering at this point. And I think they do. If you are able to offer them a good service, if you're able to show that you're really trying, your teachers are trying, then you do see success. It's hard. It's really hard. This business is a really easy business, as Ashish, I think it's an extremely profitable business. It's the biggest problem is the regulation does not allow the right kind of people to come in. People like me cannot even think about running a class 12 CBSE school, because the investment required is a few crores. And there is no way that with the not-for-profit rule, I'll be able to generate that kind of funding from formal sources. So people like me cannot run schools, and so the only schools I could run, given the individual savings I had, was affordable schools, which I'm really happy about. But that's a bigger issue. What I'm trying to say is that parents really appreciate when they see that you're trying and you're really giving the best. And if you do that, you will be okay. I'm not saying you're going to be great, but at this time, nobody is great, and that's good enough.
Okay, yeah, at this point, nobody is great and everybody is trying. Everybody needs to be a little bit more open towards, what others have to say, come up with a solution together. I think we're all just figuring our way out in this unprecedented situation. But Arundhati Chavan, do you want to come in on that aspect about teachers and how do they go about adapting to this new setup? How are teachers adapting to, staring at a screen and still managing or trying to discipline 30 students who may be a challenge to discipline in a classroom, and on a virtual screen, it's perhaps going to be even more difficult. People will keep muting, unmuting, running away, and all of that will happen.
Yes, I agree. And every day, with my interactions, my observations with the teachers, lessons and all, I find that teachers are finding it very difficult to discipline the children. But now, in Mumbai, the children have adopted this online system. Then where I feel bad for the teachers, because for that 140 minutes class or 30 minutes class, they have to prepare for 5 to 6 hours, and it is also again taking care of their own household things and their kids and all. But teachers are trying to manage, and with online there is interaction with the students, so students are also happy to see their teacher, and teachers are more observant. But it is more stressful for them, because every time they have to check that whether they are muting it or unmuting it, and when they are asking the question, or the interaction between teachers and students, many times that students make noise and then they have to control. But gradually they are learning, and as I said that I really appreciate that if there is no net connectivity, or when they find that in some class that the children cannot manage with the net connection, immediately after the class they call their parents and tell them कि okay आज class में ये हुआ, we taught this. So it is like कि they are trying to improve, and but managing everything is very stressful. So that is why I feel that they should get their salary, that is the thing, like in time, because they have to manage so many things. So it is like कि somewhere even I feel that government can contribute, they can find out some way, subsidize some things, so that even private school teachers also can be benefited for that, like. So, and if like as I said
Yes,
that
absolutely.
budget schools, if budget schools are closed down, then our government schools so well equipped,
Yeah.
their infrastructure is well equipped so that they can accommodate so many students. So that also government has to think about it. And I feel that teachers, like we are neglecting them. That should not happen. Teachers they need respect, and sometimes it
Yes, no,
happens that they
absolutely.
are
I agree
taking
with
class, they
you.
are doing their
Um,
best, they are doing
I
their
hope we
best,
don't
but
come to a
the
situation
parents are
where we
passing
have to look
comments and
at
all.
saving
That
a
should
lot of
not happen.
schools, Arundhati Chavan. I hope we don't come to a situation where we start seeing a large number of schools shutting down, because in an absence of an extremely strong public education system, and we have one, but it's not that strong everywhere across the country, it's not the same. We do need these schools to continue the way they have so far. One other point that I wanted to address before we wrap this conversation is about the impact, the overall impact it has in the growth and learning of a child. And Ms. Wadia, if you want to comment on that aspect, the fact that children are going to be within the constraints of their home, at max maybe their campus premise, their interaction with others their age will reduce a lot, the outdoor activities reduce a lot. Is there a concern, and something that we haven't even started talking about yet, about the long-term impact it may have on the just on the mental growth of our students?
Yes.
So I would not like to minimize the troubles that many families have because parents have to work, the homes are small, none of that. But I'd like to offer another positive view of what's going on. You see, what is happening is that because we cannot have the standard teacher standing in front of the class and giving long lectures, we have switched to doing projects. We have switched to writing essays. We have switched to thinking more and giving students more autonomy over and control over their learning. And if we can continue this beyond COVID, I think this is a very, very good development. Because, I mean, in India, we were just refusing to give up this attitude of teachers, just lecturing as if adults know everything and children don't know. What the IT and the move to digital has taught us is that children are actually much more comfortable with the digital medium. They learn in very different circumstances from the way adults think about that medium. And so we should be watching the children and learning from them. And if we can, then beyond COVID, we will have taken away some very valuable lessons. And just to add a last point, I wanted to say that I had the privilege of being part of the drafting committee of the National Education Policy, and the draft National Education Policy, and the policy has put in a lot of thought into many of the issues that were raised today. And hopefully, when the government's version of the policy comes out, some of these concerns that were voiced today about the difficulty of functioning of private schools will get taken care of.
Okay, very quickly, Mr. Ashish Dhawan, do you want to come in on the point that I raised? While I understand what Leela Chandranwadia is saying, that there will be some positive takeaways about how children are adapting to it, but is there a concern about some other kind of an impact? There's a lot of debate that's going on about how much of screen time is okay. What about their personal interactivity with other people?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt that this is a year where there's a setback to learning, that inequity increases dramatically. The top 10% are doing just fine. Their parents are more involved. The bottom 50%, fall behind. There are lots of issues with mental health, psychological well-being. I mean, we are human beings. We're social creatures. We want to be around our friends. We learn a lot from our peers. None of that is happening. Screen time, we know beyond a certain point, is not so good. Being cocooned up is and not being able to play is not healthy for a child's holistic development. So I think it's hard to deny that there's a major setback. I think the silver lining, as Leena pointed out, is greater autonomy for children. We're putting learning in the hands of the learner, which I think is very important. Two is parents are, even in low-income households, getting a little bit more involved with their child's learning. Otherwise you just shipped your child off to school. Now the worksheet comes, you have to take a look, you see your child finishes it. There's a greater involvement. Teachers actually know the parent's number and bother to communicate and stay in touch. Wasn't the case earlier. And I hope this will all remain out of COVID, because we know household effects are extremely important. If we want the bottom half to catch up, going to school is important, but we need their parents to be more involved. We need the children to take more control of the learning. And I want to just make one last point, this whole issue of elite private schools. Just keep in mind, the median fee of a private school is about 550 rupees a month. That's 7,000 rupees a year. There's on average 300 children in every private school. That's a revenue of 20 lakhs. I mean, you add ancillary revenues, maybe it's 30 lakhs. Even if an owner is making profit, I mean, they're just earning their wage. And so I think they've had to cut back on teacher salaries because there's no revenue. But I think we have to really look at this sector and say, these people may have a profit motive, but they're not businessmen who are fleecing anybody. They're actually working very hard to serve the children of our country. And we ought to give these teachers and school owners some respect.
Okay, points well taken. I think we've completely run out of time on this conversation. Suffice to say, many more will be needed in the coming months as we find our way, evolve, slowly in this COVID era, what's working for the students and the children, their parents, the teachers, those running these private schools, and even, public education system, how that's evolving. At the end of the day, viewers, we may begin to unlock and step out of our homes. We may have a situation where many of us are even able to travel to work and get to office a few days in a week. But one thing that's perhaps going to take the longest is opening up of schools, and definitely not in the way that we saw before the pandemic hit us, before March 2020. That kind of a scenario with 70 children in one classroom perhaps will not happen for a while. So this is a segment, and this is a sector that needs urgent attention, constant dialogue, innovation, and a lot of interaction between the various stakeholders for us to figure an easy way forward. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us on this conversation.